Oberhof, Germany, has been the home of sledding activities since 1905. In fact, in 1931, the facility hosted the first ever FIBT Bobsled World Championships, a two-man event, which was won by the German team. Welcome back to the Eberspecher Luge World Cup. This is primarily a luge track now, of course, and the conditions are cool and foggy, but we did have a lot of fast times as run number one of the women's singles competition moved along earlier this morning. That start record was set by Egla, and that would be a Madeline Egla, who has the first run lead. Natalie Mogg set the track record a couple of days ago in the Nations Cup competition, but this is a new design this year, so the records were bound to fall. Natalie Geisenberger, the two-time defending Olympic champion, is in third place. That's where she sits in the World Cup standings. Julia Tobitz is in second place. She leads the World Cup. And Madeline Egla, a four-time winner this year on the World Cup, is second behind Tobitz in the World Cup overall, but first so far today. They will be the last three to go. Poland will open things up. As you check out the start list, let me introduce myself. Tim Singer, pleased to be bringing you live coverage around the world, and also pleased to have alongside, once again, 2014 Olympic bronze medalist and two-time world champion, Erin Hamlin. Erin, what are we going to see in the next 50 minutes or so?
I'm definitely going to put money on a very close race, a lot of switch-ups in that top 10 area, but anyone's game really in the top 10 to get in there. But that 1-2 spot is where, we're going to be looking at that race between Tobitz and Egla. It's been exciting all season, and it's coming down to these last races for the overall.
And what's impressive about Madeline is she's doing it everywhere. It's not just in Innsbruck. I mean, she's won races on tracks you would expect maybe she's still learning, which is incredible.
Yeah, it's been a long time since we've seen that from someone other than a German, so it's really exciting.
Claudia Dominska of Poland leads off run number two. World Cup Luge is 2 runs total time, so the clock you see moving is a startup from her first heat time of 42.754. We touched on this briefly in the first run, but it bears repeating that Maciej Sokovic, the standout men's singles competitor from Poland, after being injured at the beginning of the season, is back on track doing training runs, and we'll see if he's on track to actually make it to the Olympic Games. That would be very exciting.
I think the big detail about that would be for the relay for Poland, when you put their doubles athlete consistency out of Claudia and then potentially Matthias, that really could play out really well. They can be competitive.
Definitely, and they have been at the past few Olympics. Top 10 performances, and on a good day they could be top 5. Dominska down with a time of 42.566, 0.2 of a second better than her first run.
Yeah, she had a couple spots where they were sloppy right there, a big slap off of curve 11, but really managed it well.
One down, 25 to go. And next up we have from the Ukraine, 21-year-old Olena Shmaha, 10th place finisher at the Youth Olympic Games. She's finished as high as 28th in the World Cup overall. That was 2 years ago. Right now she's ranked 37th. Looks like they're taking their time a little bit to clear the track, but that may be because a couple of athletes at the start of the day who were in the start list did not race. Question comes in from Luge moms, Erin. You know them well, and they want to know what's up with so many of the athletes cutting holes in the back of their speed suits. Interesting that the lead countries like Germany and Austria are not following that trend. Do you know anything about that 4,000 miles away?
I could make an educated guess, but I do not know what the official detail is.
I like your educated guesses.
I have also noticed that there's the panels on the back of their suits are black, so some of them look like they have holes, but I think it's just a different color. The pattern is not the same on the piece of fabric. However, for mobility issues, a lot of times the tightness and like very close-fitting nature of the luge suits it's not comfortable for sliding. And so for the start, especially to have the extra mobility, maybe they're cutting holes to be able to pull a start better and more comfortably.
Dominska moves up one spot by a mere 5/1000ths of a second ahead of Smaha in the early going of run number 2 in Oberhof.
It has been known to happen, too, that the holes that sometimes happen are not on purpose.
That's okay. The result of some wayward driving, perhaps?
Or just very tight suits and fabric that won't hold up to it. The pull at the start.
First of 2 Ukrainians through and down. And next up, the lone Olympic representative in women's singles luge from Sweden, Tova Kohala from Luchtero. It's been a very trying season, Aaron, for these athletes. In fact, sleds and equipment that were left behind in China took forever to come back. If I got my information straight, the last boxes of equipment finally arrived 2 days ago. What is that? That's January 14th. And everyone left China, I believe, November 23rd. So that's just COVID on top of that. It's just been a very, very tough, stressful season for a lot of these athletes.
Yeah, that's just unbelievable that they were not able to get that equipment back. And having it be that long, I feel like at some point you'd start getting scared if you'd ever see it again. And to think that you would not get it is, especially in an Olympic year, I couldn't even imagine the added stress.
All right, Craig writes in, he's a pretty educated guy in the sport of luge, but he'd like to know that how are they going to determine the Olympic start list based on the races we're calling now?
Yeah, so they're established same seating system. It's just switched up a little bit when they do the overall start list because there's like, it gets kind of complicated, so we might not be able to go into detail here, but the numbers within like this A, B, and C seed, there's actually a certain amount that they go like the reverse order within that seed, and then they go reverse order within the next seed. So every run is different. The first one is that the draw within the seeds. The second run is the reverse order of the draw within the seeds. And then day 2 is based on results of day 1. So
third run
first,
fastest
third
to
run,
slowest,
fastest
right?
to
Yeah.
slowest within the seeds, and then fastest to, or slowest to fastest within the seeds. So a little bit more complicated than the normal 2-run World Cup.
Most of the North Americans are absent in today's competition. A little later on, we will see Ashley Farquharson of the USA. But here is the lone Canadian, McKenna Hutchin. McKenna is 21 years old from Calgary. And it gives us an opportunity. I mean, Olympic spots, not entirely, but for the most part, were determined on reaching several tiers with the World Cup standings. And the fact, Aaron, that there were no races in Whistler, Park City, and Lake Placid, that worked so much against the North American athletes.
Yeah, it's actually interesting if you look at, some of the countries that have historically always gotten, a certain amount of sleds in the Olympics that are left out. Italy for doubles, in the U.S., for example. And then you look at, the 4 countries that got 2 sleds, and they're all
Hosted races.
Right, so
right.
It's definitely plays into it, especially in an Olympic year. Having that comfort of a home track, it's a major factor.
McKenna, podium finisher at the Canadian World Championships, right now is in 3rd place. Claudia Dominska of Poland, she may not stay there long, but it's a nice little run up the ladder in the early going for her here in run number 2.
Yeah, and she had a couple spots in her run that were kind of squirrely, but I think in Oberhof sometimes you have to let the sled run, and if you control it too much, you're going to set yourself up for a slow time. So I think Dominska really let the sled go and was able to keep it in control enough, and it's showing now. People are having a hard time catching her.
Thanks for waking up early to watch live coverage on Olympic Channel. I'm Tim Singer along with Aaron Hamlin. And Aaron, how did you fare in your career here in Oberhof? What were the good results? What were the forgettable ones?
You know, most were probably forgettable. Oberhof and I did not have a very loving relationship. It wasn't my favorite track to compete on. Later in my career, I will say, the ice started to be built a little bit more consistently and was a little bit more forgiving, so I enjoyed it a little bit more. But I think I finished 8th in World Championships here, and maybe that was 8th. I don't know. I know 8th was my best finish here for a really long time, and then I managed to better that to 6th, I think. But that's as good as it got.
Okay. Elena Stetskiv now on ice with a 900-second lead over Dominska. Next year, Oberhof will host not only the World Luge Championships, but the World Biathlon Championships. And that will be a huge party, COVID permitting, here in Thuringia.
Stetskiv is having a beautiful run, and it's showing in the time, almost 2/10.
Wow, 42.492 was the second run time, and that is 13 hundredths better than her first heat, and nearly, as you said, 2/10 up on Dominska.
Really smooth under curve 12. This is a spot that can set you up really well for the rest of the track, and she did a good job of really nailing those lines.
Nina Zugler, the first of the Italians to go. Throws down that shield, grabs the handles. Not a steep start ramp here. Zugler is off to her first Olympic Games, and she has some fairly impressive booties to fill if she wants to even come close to her father's Olympic resume. 6 Olympics, 6 Olympic medals.
It's definitely some serious pressure there for her, but from what I've heard, she doesn't feel it that much.
And
only a little.
On top of that, Armin is always quick to point out pressure has never been put on her. Luge was her call if she wanted to do it. So
exactly.
That's half the battle. 0.06 of a second back at that last stop, and now 0.03 back. It's going to be tight, but I don't think she'll catch Stetskiv.
No, she just ran out of track there. It was almost on the edge for a while in that run, but started to get away from her towards the bottom.
That was a quick look at the legend, Armin Zugler, not only the head of this Italian program, but also a member of the International Luge Federation Executive Board. Winding our way down to the top 3 a little later on, Aaron, Geisenberger, Tobitz, and Egla. They've been in the 3 most consistent in the world all year. They're the top 3 in the World Cup standings. So that's going to be a lot of fun. But as you mentioned, 3 through 10, very tight here. So the podium is still somewhat open.
Yeah, I would say so. And, you know, the times are so tight. Any little tiny mistake, which we've seen quite a bit of consistency from athletes, which is really impressive. So we'll see if everyone can continue that trend, and it'll just make for some more tight racing.
Raluca Stramatararu, senior member of this World Cup field at 36 years old. She is on her way to her 4th Olympics. I love her response. I've said this a few times during the last few years when I asked Raluca what the hardest part about luge was. She said, when it's the thing you love to do most, nothing is hard. You just enjoy it. I may have been looking for a more specific answer, but I liked that one.
Yeah, it definitely shows she's been at this for a very long time.
200ths is her lead. Very close right now. Raluca chasing down the Ukrainian. She falls back on the last few curves, really the last big curve, the Finnish Kreisel. Second place right now for Strama Tararu.
Yeah, I thought she was going to get her. It must have just been something slightly off with Kreisel. Her lines even looked okay. It's a spot, though, that, you know, with aerodynamics playing such a huge part in this sport, if your head's just a little bit too high, maybe she was looking where she was going a little bit more in Kreisel, that last corner. You can start picking things apart so closely right here. Decent line there, maybe a little bit too much direction to curve 12, so she was pushed a little early, but kept it really smooth. Right here, she kept that sled on that right wall. You really want to have an early entrance onto Kreisel here in Oberhof, and she was able to do that. But that head maybe lifted up a little, and one of those tiny details that can just, you know, clip away at those hundredths of a second.
Alina Vitola on ice now. She'll be headed to San Moritz next weekend, where she won their first World Cup race last season. She cites as one of her hobbies shopping. And Aaron, St. Moritz, Switzerland is not the place to do shopping.
Yeah, you might spend every single cent
That's correct. You max out that credit card at the first
one purchase.
store.
Yep. Definitely the most glamorous place that we go.
For sure. She's in the green. She's staying in the green. Let's see what happens here. This is such an interesting track. Big lead right now for the Latvian, but
yeah,
winding
big lead,
left and right.
Yeah, sorry about that, Tim. She had a little bit of offline spots there in the middle, but, you know, I've said it before, sometimes right on the edge of out of control is the fastest.
42.118, and that's 0.4 better than her first run, where we noted earlier today that it looked a little surprising how slow she was. Really, all three Latvian women.
Yeah, that shows a lot of speed out of her for this second run. Right here is where I thought she was really playing with fire, but she managed to make it work, and sometimes that's the fastest. If you kind of let that track do half the work and you're just along for the ride a little bit, you're not controlling too much and you go fast.
The Latvian out in front, the Russian getting ready at the top, Ekaterina Katnikova. Final visualization of the course. And to put a period on what we were talking about earlier, the Olympic qualifications and the way they do the draw at the Olympics, we should note, and Scott was quick to point out through Twitter, that they cut the field to 20 after the third run, so only 20-1 in run number 4. And Scott said, you know, it's maybe not fair that after qualifying for the Olympics you don't get a fourth run, but truth be told, Aaron, luge on the World Cup is one of the few sports where everyone does get a second run.
Yeah, that's true. Most sports I feel like do cut it for the second round, or there's like a finals you have to qualify for. So yeah, we have the qualification in that first Nations Cup race, but after that, everyone gets 2 runs in the full World Cup. Unless
you crash, unless you don't make it across the finish, of course.
Exactly.
Or get DQ'd. Katnikova, 1300ths behind. We just saw Vitola have a sensational run. It will be interesting to see if that holds up for a while. Ekaterina cutting a little time into it down here at the bottom.
Yeah, Katnikova had a couple spots up top that were a little off, but she was trying to dig into that the whole run and managed to cut it to 700s, which is impressive.
Seven hundredths behind Vitola now, as Ekaterina Katnikova will head to her first Olympics. She'll do it as a world champion in 2020.
That transition definitely helped her gain some time. That was really nice. She went into curve 12 with very smooth lines, good position.
Ketnikova done for the day, likely will not qualify for the relay a little later on this afternoon. And the focus on the eyes of Elitsa Taruma, who started this sport because her older sisters were also lugers. There's a lot of in the family in Latvia with the Tarumas and the Sheiks and the Apariods and the Dukers and Skeleton.
Yeah, I feel like most of them are from that area as well in Zugler, so I feel like it's one of those things where something for kids to do, and it's something so exciting once you see a family member do it and you learn about it. I feel like it's pretty appealing.
0.07 of a second behind her younger teammate.
Big mistake there, though. I think she's going to lose a lot of time.
It's now down to 300ths. Let's see how much she loses. And, well, she didn't. She actually picked up a little at the bottom. What was that mistake and how costly was it?
Called my bluff. She actually saved it really well. She went pretty late into curve. Now I got to remember, tack my memory. My first thought was that it was curve 8, but I think it was further down than that. It looks like she just had a little bit too much direction off of a corner, which sent her too soon to the next. And she went really, really late. She ended up getting pushed away. If a corner hasn't started yet and you go to enter it, it'll usually push you away. It's basically like, nope, not yet. You can't enter yet, and it ends up with a late entrance, which is right here, really early to curve 12. Actually, the wall, she hits the wall kind of, but manages it really, really well. That's the experience showing. She's able to correct it in the corner, which is basically steering through the pressure. If she had not corrected it, she would have gone straight up to the roof, which could have been a crash on the exit or just a ton more time. So yeah, experience helping her out big right there.
Lone American in today's race, Ashley Farquharson, who had an 8th place finish to open up the season. She's been in the top 16 in all but a couple of races this year. And shout out to her teammates Summer Britcher and Emily Sweeney, who are here in Oberhof, but nursing injuries and not racing. We certainly hope to see them next week in St. Moritz, because both of those American athletes can be spectacularly fast at the bottom of long tracks.
Little offline there, a little bit of a skid, I think, but she handled it okay.
Farquharson was in 16th place after run number 1. She's got her work cut out here. The bottom part of the track, nearly a quarter of a second back.
Big mistake there off of 13.
Really one of the biggest we've seen all day. We saw that happen a couple of times yesterday. That straightaway is deceiving, and it bleeds a lot of time. So Ashley loses 7 spots here in run number 2.
Yeah, that's a big one. She kind of was losing right from the top. Not known for her fast starts, but usually she can pick it up down the track. Shorter time, though. This Oberhof track doesn't leave a lot of space for you to gain that time back. And when you're trying to just come from behind the whole run and have mistakes like that, it kind of makes it impossible.
Super slow-mo look from behind, and then down here before the finish Kreisel.
Yeah, just some really late height on 13, and then there's really nowhere to go but straight into that right wall. And then her feet down that whole straightaway, that's just a ton of time.
Well, the USA can pack away its gear without a doubles team here this week. There is no team relay for the United States. They head off to the final World Cup race. And we head on to our next competitor, Verena Hoffa of Italy. Born on St. Patrick's Day.
It looks like she pulled a little bit crooked, but she dug through really well. I know that's one of the more difficult things and different of the other sliding sports. Luge does not have grooves in the ice, so we have to. It was always really difficult. That was one of the things I struggled with the most, is staying straight on start ramps.
And the best in the world do throughout their careers. That's something you're never fully sure of. You can't take for granted, right?
Exactly.
0.2 of a second behind Vitola, and we called it when we saw it. Elina had a great run for Latvia, and she continues to move on up.
Yeah, her time would have put her, I think, right in podium spot on the first run. So that's pretty impressive. And I was going to say maybe the ice is in different shape, but none of these other athletes are matching it. So I think she really just threw down a solid run.
We may get an interesting indication next because Sigita Berzina, another young Latvian, is headed down. And it could just be that Martins and Inars did a lot of shifting with the sled runners in the setup for run 2.
And we've seen a lot of speed out of the Latvians this season, so it's not a big surprise. It's just, having the consistency there. So I think when these younger athletes are putting down good runs, they have all the tools to be in those podium contending spots.
Now Sigita Berzina, 21 years old, from Sigulda, 8th place finisher at the Junior World Championships in 2020. Luge will be the opening event at the track in Yangjing the day after the opening ceremonies, as is custom. 2 days of men's singles, 2 days of women's singles, 1 day of doubles, and then the team relay. She kept
Big mistake.
Yeah, she kept up with her teammate in the top half. But I heard that more than saw that mistake.
Yeah, that's a spot that you oftentimes stop hearing a sled because you actually get air. So when that happens, it's never a good sign.
Wow, back 5 places, and that woman has moved from 19th to 14th, and she may not be done because at least the next athlete to come down, or the next couple, are all within the same split area.
Yeah, and from the top, it was looking like she could, challenge for that top spot, but with that huge mistake, she's lucky she actually didn't crash. See, she went so high there, and you're just launched into that curve 10, and that's a spot that I have seen sleds actually fly from one curve to the other. They barely even go through the transition.
Yes, it's interesting especially if you take a look at the track map in Oberhof. It's somewhat reminiscent, Aaron, of the S combination in Königssee, which is deceptively tough. This maybe not as hard as those S's, but they continue back and forth and left and right.
Yeah, it's those tight labyrinth transitions. So from curve 8 to curve 11, there's very tight transitions, each one of them back to back to back, and it's really hard. It can get away from you really quickly.
Andrea Vetter, 26 years old. 6 paddles. You're coached by Tatjana Hufner when you throw an extra paddle in there.
Absolutely.
Start record 7.559. Again, as Summer pointed out to you, Aaron, records were expected to fall today, right?
Yeah, whenever they do any sort of adjustment to the track or the timing eyes on a track, they will have new records just because it shifts how the times are on the track. So even if it's just very minor, there will be new track and start records.
Andy well out in front at 1900ths, losing 200ths, but she should hang on, barring some big mistake down here at the finish. She crosses, nicely done, 42.174. It was a good run for Vitola, but it's the Italian now out in front. And
it's another solid time that would have been right up there in third place in the first run. So maybe we are seeing some faster ice, but she also just threw down a really, really beautiful run with a start record. It's a good combo.
Definitely. Oh, that's such a great look at that.
Yeah, you can see those spikes. They're only on the 3 longest fingers. And really just every one of them just digs in. That 6th paddle paid off. sometimes it's riding the edge of, okay, one more paddle could actually slow you down if you're not quick enough and if it's not effective enough. So you have to make that call if you think you can really make it count.
It's safe to say that next week in St. Moritz, Switzerland, the very first sled to go down the ice in the Nations Cup race will have a start record and a track record, because they redo that track every year, unless there was a Swiss National Championships some point over the break. I don't believe there was. 1/10 of a second back. That's a pretty big deficiency for Loganova that early on the track.
Yeah, but you know, when someone sets a track record and that first split is all the way through that first curve, so it's a longer start split, so that's where you'll see more time kind of come into play.
Still just 18 years old, this athlete. She'll turn 19 on Valentine's Day. She's not headed to the Olympic Games, so she'll celebrate by watching Demchenko and Ivanova and Katnikova as she crosses with a time of 42.528, dropping 4 positions in the standings here in run number 2. If this had been a sprint after the World Cup weekend, she would have temporarily fallen from 12th place out of that top 15.
That's probably a little bit of a relief now for athletes, not having to worry about the added stress of getting top 15. But obviously you want to have good results, but that's always a little bit more. Little correction here off of curve 11. She really got pushed towards that slider's right wall, but managed it really well. But yeah, right from the top, she was just losing time and significantly behind Foter.
All right, 13 down, 13 still to come here. Well, actually 11 remaining. We had the cut down with the 2 that didn't show. In case you missed it, Trinity Ellis of Team Canada had a positive COVID test 2 days ago, so both she and select teammates are certainly respecting the contact tracing and staying away from the track. Sandra Robotcher on course now, a one-time World Cup winner. Not as many paddles there. What was her injury, Aaron, that kept her out for so long?
I know both her and Andy actually have battled shoulder problems. I'm not positive if that's what it was, but if I had to guess, I would say that's probably what she was dealing with. That and maybe back issues, but I'm not 100% sure. Shoulder is what I would guess. Shoulder and back so common in the sport of luge, but right now some are with the finger issue and several broken bones among the feet of athletes. It's just a brutal sport, isn't it? It can definitely be pretty brutal, and all your extremities are kind of exposed and at the mercy of things. So we're not enclosed in anything. These athletes are if there are crashes, things are all out there to hit walls and for the sled to hit, and there's a lot of factors, a lot of things, variables that can cause injury. Second place for Sandra Robotcher, whom we expect, despite missing these Olympics, will stick around to compete at the Olympics in Cortina d'Ampezzo in 2026, a home Olympics for Italy. Pretty solid run for Sandra. She didn't have any huge mistakes, a couple tiny ones that she managed really well. It shows her experience, and that the time she has been off the sled hasn't really taken her too far backwards. Really nice position there into the finish curve. With a big smile to boot. It's Italy 1-2, Latvia 3-4 right now in the standings as we make our way to the top 10 after run number 1. Final adjustments on the mask of Natalie Mogg, ranked 10th after the first heat. Her advantage is still just about 0.06 of a second over Andi Vetter, who had such a good run. Aaron, because of the COVID protocols, these athletes do not have a coach sitting by them at the start. And that really, you can't overstate really what an adjustment that is physically and mentally. For sure. There are a couple different things that a lot of athletes rely on their coach at the start to help them with, whether it's zipping up those race booties. You were just mentioning the mask. You know, a lot of There's athletes that clip it into their helmet in a way so it doesn't fall off or get messed with when you're sliding, and athletes will check with a coach to make sure everything's aligned. So without that, they've had to make some big adjustments.
Natalie found some good time down at the bottom, but not enough to overtake Vetter. She falls between the two Italians right now. It's Italy, Switzerland, Italy, and a pair of Latvians in the top 5. Not a bad run, however, for Natalie Mogg, who's headed to her home track and her fan club, Sliding Team Mogg. I'm not sure if they'll be allowed at the track, but it'll be nice to be home.
Yeah, like you said, Tim, pretty good run. No major mistakes. So it's just one of those, Andy put down a really, really good run. I think she'll stick in that top spot for a bit. But really respectable sliding from Natalie.
Tatiana Ivanova's 17 career World Cup wins are by far the most of any athlete not wearing a German uniform currently active. She's 4 ahead of her countrymate, Semen Pavlichenko, who has 13. What a great comeback story for Ivanova, who limped away from the track at the relay in Yangjing, which is just got to be such a jolt to start an Olympic year. But not only did she come back, she came back with a win last week in Sigulda.
Yeah, she clearly didn't miss too much, miss a beat when she came back. But like you said, just being off of a sled that much in an Olympic year, far from ideal, not what you're looking for. And having the injury on the Olympic track, it's something that hopefully she won't keep at the top of her mind when she goes back, but you never know.
She had the green most of the way. Now she's 100th of a second back with a good setup. The Russian sleds have been known to go from red back to green here, but the trend is working against her.
She's a little offline there in 12:13.
Wow, she found a little bit of time, but by 100th of a second, she falls behind Andrea Vetter. So a good showing by the Italian, who is now no worse than top 9. And it bears repeating, I know it's not good news, but it is important news that the Russian athletes are all headed to the Olympic Games, but they are not headed as part of Team Russia due to continuing sanctions of that nation's sports federations. They will compete something like the international athletes or the IOC athletes or the Russian athletes, but it will not be the flag, it will not be the uniform.
Yeah, and right here she got a little bit offline, a little early to 12, and it followed her, and she had some problems in 13, and this is an area where she normally starts to pick up that speed and kind of make up that time, so she wasn't able to do that.
Victoria Demchenko has about 15 hundredths on Andi Vetter down at the bottom, 8th place after the first run. Victoria, now 26 years old, did not make the Olympic team in 2018, but then stormed onto the World Cup right after that with podiums and race wins and some spectacular crashes to go along.
Bump there. It's kind of a rare mistake. Normally you see athletes pretty online there at the top. There's not a lot of speed yet.
Six hundredths back. Speed at about 70 miles per hour. The Russians have had good performances and bad performances this weekend. Doubles was a forgettable weekend. Not bad here, 3rd place right now. Great run for Vetter up this leaderboard.
Yeah, she really laid one down, and you know, I mentioned that time would have put her on in a podium spot for that first run, and it's looking like it's, you know, not an ice fluke. It looks like she just really laid it down. I can't remember her first run if she had major errors or not. I'm trying to tack my memory, but Demchenko was relatively clean. That one spot at the top of the track maybe just set her off a little bit. Right here, I think she was a little too soon over to Kreisel, so she got bumped away and then has a little bit of a more rough entrance than she would have wanted, but she was already losing time, so wasn't able to pull back into the green.
It It was a sensational first run for Austria, placing all 3 women in the top 7. Here's Lisa Schulte. She was only 1,000th ahead of Demchenko, which puts her about 1,500ths of a second behind the current leader, Andrea Vetter. Schultz's challenge remains putting 2 good runs together. Several times over the past few seasons, she's been at or near podium position in the first run, only to drop back. She did, we should say, earn her first podium earlier this year in China.
Yeah, and that's what we always say. Luge is such an experience-based sport. You know, sometimes that's the biggest thing to get over the hump of, you know, just getting confidence in your sliding and being able to show up and put 2 runs down. That can sometimes be the most challenging, even on the easiest tracks.
Well, look at this. How are these Austrian sleds looking today? She was in the red, now she's in the green, 8,000ths, now back into the red. It'll only be about perfect driving. Still 8,000ths of a second from ahead by 8 to back by 8. What's going to happen here? Hard hit. And she dropped a little more time down at the bottom, but at least we saw that, especially with 2 Austrians still to come, including the first run leader, Vetter can definitely be challenged.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there were 2 really small errors I saw that for sure set her back. That didn't allow her to continue to remain in the green and keep picking up time. But we'll see what they show here. This wasn't too bad. She was a little early to curve 12. Got bumped there a bit. Right here, she starts to drift away. She's got to bring the sled back to that right side to go early to Kreisel. And then that bump on the exit to Kreisel, I think it was just those tiny, tiny errors. You know, when we're talking about 800ths and 8,000ths of a second, the tiniest details. See, that was really good timing. It was like that was rehearsed. They matter so much.
Well, Aaron, I just mentioned there were 3 Austrians in the top 7. How about 4 Germans in the top 6? Anna Bierreiter, a 3-time World Cup winner, the first to go. Some pretty good paddles there. Let's check out this start time for the Bavarian. Start record, 7.549. Madeline Egla will have something to say about that in a few sleds. However, this is an opportunity for Bierreiter to make a statement and put some pressure on the final 5.
Like we said, they're so tight in these top spots that the first person to lay down a really solid run that looks like Bierreiter is doing is going to set the tone.
3rd last year on the World Cup overall points. She pounds around that finish, but with an incredible time of 42.131. That would put her in 3rd place in the first run. More importantly, that puts her in 1st place right now in run number 2 with 5 remaining rather.
Yeah, she did exactly what she needed to do. We'll see if it's enough. You see how close her fingers are actually to the runners. That's something that's really important when you can put that power and force straight down into the ice. You don't want your hands to kind of splay out. The further they get away from your body, the less power you're going to have. So that was really good positioning, but nerve-wracking sometimes knowing your fingers are that close to getting run over.
Sure. Hanna Prock well on her way with a good run here to her best result of the season. Her previous best was a 6th place in Winterberg. But the 2018 Olympian did have a podium finish. That was a couple of seasons ago in Koenigsee. All 3 offsprings of great Olympic medalists have qualified this year. Hanna Prock, Nina Zugler, and Victoria Demchenko. Together, their parents have something like 11. Their fathers have 11 combined Olympic medals.
It's such an impressive stat, and definitely a really cool moment to say that these 3 are headed to the Olympics in the kind of footsteps of their fathers.
Let's see what Hanna can do against a great run just put down by Anna Bierreiter. Hanna, one of the smaller athletes in the field, We've learned over the years, Aaron, there really is no one prototype size in the sport of luge, which makes it kind of equal and interesting.
Yeah, it's a question I've gotten asked so much.
Second place, but a distant second place, as Hannah only manages the 8th best time of the run so far. And what's your answer? There is no one size.
Yeah, exactly. If you look historically back at the most successful athletes, it tends to be all over the board. There are things that kind of help. There are aspects, being long helps at the start.
Flexible.
Being flexible does, and being small is more aerodynamic. So there's like that trade-off. What helps, what hurts. And then obviously just that natural ability and the natural skill, I think, is what really shows through and what matters the most. But and obviously equipment is always a factor too. So you can put the perfect body type on a not so great equipment and you're going to struggle. So it's a complete mixed bag, I'll say.
Top 4 now, and the 4 Germans that made it into the top 6 today represent the 4 different tracks in Germany. The 2 Bavarians, Geisenberger and Bierreiter. You've got this woman, Cheyenne Rosenthal from Winterberg, and still coming up, Julia Tobitz, for whom this is her home track in Oberhof, but she grew up in and around the Altenburg track. That's all you need to know about the depth of this German program. 4 tracks, 4 great sliders.
Yeah, that helps so much when you have a variety of venues to train on and slide on. They all have very unique characteristics, and so that's just going to build the skills of all these different athletes.
Trivia for all of you, a little oddity. This is her World Cup debut, Cheyenne Rosenthal, but she already has 4 gold medals this year on the World Cup. Explain. Did I stump you?
Are you asking me, Tim?
Yes.
Oh. Doubles.
That's right.
Yeah.
Debut season of women's doubles. Not enough here. She falls behind Bierreiter as well, but it will be a top 5, and it's very possible Germany puts 4 in the top 5. Yeah, what a great story with Cheyenne and Jessie Degenhardt in this first season of World Cup doubles with 4 races, 4 gold medals on the brand new discipline on World Cup Luge.
Yeah, I was actually a little surprised to see her name on the start list here, just because I do know that she had shifted over and was focusing on doubles, but I guess any run on the track is valuable, so getting this experience is definitely not going to hurt, and always nice to have the option.
Top 3 now, podium positions. They're also the top 3 in the World Cup standings. First up, the 8-time World Cup overall winner, Natalie Geisenberger. She had some issues at the start, Aaron, in run number 1, and we were told she got her hand caught between the shell and the handle at the start.
That is not fun. It's never fun to have that issue at the start, especially when it's painful.
So we'll see if Natalie can make a move. She trails the top 2 by a pretty wide margin, but if she has a clean run, she can certainly guarantee the podium. She hasn't won a race yet this year, but that was sort of the case last year for Natalie in her return from the maternity leave, with a whole bunch of second places before her first victory.
Yeah, I don't think her not being on the top of the podium means we can count her out ever. It looks like her start wasn't back in perfect form like I would have expected. So maybe she's a little bit sore on her hand. But
this is going to be tight, Aaron.
It's going to be very tight, but if there's someone who can pull it out, it's her.
And she almost cut it all from 500ths back to 300ths back to 100th back. Bierreiter is on the podium. Right now, Geisenberger is on the outside looking in. It's Germany 1, 2, 3 in the standings, with 1 more still to come.
Yeah, she just ran out of track there. She needed a little bit more. Like I said, I still feel like she didn't have her normal speed and power on the start. Let's take a look. She paddles pretty well. She looks a little just off, not confident. The sled got a little squirrely there at the end. Not the typical start we see out of Natalie. So right from the start, I think she was not set up for her super speedy run, and she was catching up the whole way down and just ran out of track.
Now the top two, they distanced themselves from the field by a fairly good margin in run number one. Tobit's first to go. There's a look at Madeline Egla. Here's the story. Not only are they the top two, but each have 4 World Cup race wins this year, and they are the top 2 in the World Cup standings. To be precise, this woman, Tobitz, leads Egla by 72 points. So she can come a little closer to locking down her second World Cup overall simply by holding her spot right now.
Yeah, and I'm not going to be surprised if she puts the pressure on Egla. She's really going to throw down here. It's home track. She always comes out swinging in the second run, so I expect this to be a smoking run.
Yulia headed to the Olympics, her first Olympic Games. She's been about as fast as anyone, as steady as anyone in women's luge since the last Olympics. Check this out, 1/10 of a second. She had a 42.110 in the first run. Let's see if she can challenge the track record here late in run number 2. No track record, but a pretty good lead over the other Germans. Tobitz ahead of Bierreiter, Geisenberger, and Rosenthal. It's Germany 1, 2, 3, 4, with 1 Austrian still to come.
And she did put the pressure on. That's a huge lead to have. But again, her and Egla were kind of separated from the rest of the pack. So like I mentioned earlier, this is really going to come down to the Tobitz versus Egla for that win. And it's just playing into that tight race for the overall.
Yulia's starts have improved quite a bit over the last couple of years.
They haven't. It has really helped her out. She has been very consistent. This really showed that she was on her home track. She had a great run, really letting the sled fly. No real glaring mistakes at all.
Well, on this weekend, dominated by the Germans, as they always do in Oberhof, they have captured 9 of the top 5 positions in the 3 races. 4 women, 3 men, 2 doubles, all in the top 5. But can it be an Austrian on the top of the podium here in the final 2 heat race of the weekend? Madeline Egla looking to cut into the Tobitz World Cup overall lead and looking to win for the 5th time this season.
She has a decent lead, so I think it's possible. I know Tobitz really threw down a great run. We'll see what it comes down to on this next split. Still ahead.
This next split will be interesting. The trend from 17 to what?
A little high there in curve 10. Keeps it together.
Yeah, to 11. Could be a fun race right to the final few curves. Now 700s. Good form, though, in the straightaway to the Kreisel. Madeline Egla.
I don't think it's going to do it.
She hangs on by 200ths. What a great duel this is shaping up to be, Aaron, as we make our way towards the Olympics in China. These 2 athletes, they have 9 victories now, 5 for Egla, 4 for Tobitz. Egla won the World Cup test event, the Olympic test event in China, and she cuts into the lead. I believe that lead will now be about 57 points. Tobitz over Egla.
Yeah, that is a huge statement from Egla. I know she's had success all season, but to do it here in Oberhof, I'd love to see some stats on that, like the last time a German did not win in this World Cup.
Right. In men, I looked that up yesterday. Men, the Germans were actually shut out of the podium in 2019, but that's a very rare event. And women, who knows? Even Nova may have won once here.
That's true. But, man, it's been a while since that's happened consistently, and Egla's really just putting the pressure on. I'm with you, Tim. It's going to come down to a really great Olympic race. I'm excited.
Just such great form. You know, back in 2020, not too long ago, Madeline dislocated her shoulder, and she bypassed surgery. As you check out these final standings, great day, of course, for Germany with 4 in the top 5, but Egla leads a 1-6 Austria finish. Best result of the season for Andi Vetter, and Ivanova continues to cruise along. Natalie Mogg with a decent 11th as she heads to her home track in Switzerland next week. Raluca in the top 20, and just 1 Canadian and 1 American fielded in today's race. So, Erin, she dislocated her shoulder. She decided not to have surgery, let it heal by itself. And I'm not sure what she did, holistic, physical therapy, whatever it was, but she has come on so much last year first and now dominated this year.
Yeah, and with injuries like that, sometimes it causes you to really focus in on keeping it strong, keeping it healthy, so you start to really do a lot of those rehab-ish movements that can target a lot of the muscles maybe you were neglecting. And sometimes an injury can help you come back so much stronger because of that. You know, you start to really, you kind of take a step back and look at how you're training and how you can do things better for your body and make yourself stronger. And it clearly has done something great for Egla.
We will see two sets of World Cup standings coming up in a moment. The first will not reflect that overall, the 57-point differential, according to my math, because it will only reflect the two heat World Cup races and not the sprint. That's the Yoka Crystal that will wait another week to be awarded. By the way, yesterday, Johannes Ludwig clinched the World Cup men's singles title. But it'll be fun next week in St. Moritz. Doubles and women still to be decided. World Cup without the sprint, not the overall. The World Cup races. It will be interesting to see the future of the sprint. Here in this, it's even tighter. Check that out, 23 points separating these two. Julia on Friday, or actually since they did not have a World Cup sprint competition, just a test sprint competition this week, Julia Tobitz has already captured that sprint title. But now we'll get the overall, Erin. I believe, what did I say, 52 points or 57?
Yeah, something in there.
Yeah, 57 points. So what that means is Julia's still sitting pretty good because top 5 gets her there, and she's usually good for a top 5.
Yeah, I think it would have to be some crazy circumstance that would put her out of that top 5, but you can never count anything out. But it's going to be a nice, exciting race to finish off this season.